What up, friends? Welcome to another episode of The Paint Show, and today we're gonna look at burnt sienna. So friends, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited because this is a paint I use so heavily and have been using from just my beginning, the beginning of my watercolor journey, and finally I get to take a look at it in the paint show. The brand we're going to look at is Schmincke. You must recognize this tiny 5 milliliter tube. I do have a Daniel Smith version, I do have a Van Gogh version. This time I want to cover that, and there is quite a lot to say about this very interesting paint, so let me grab out my cheat sheet. I wrote a few very interesting facts here actually, so let's get started. So sienna is an earth element. It basically contains iron oxide and manganese oxide. Now, it's very skewed towards the iron oxide. There's about maybe 5% manganese oxide. But the interesting part is that this is what makes sienna a little darker than ochre. So the difference between the two is actually accounted for the manganese oxide, from what I gather, from what I could find. So naturally, in its natural state, the raw sienna itself is a yellow-brown color, and I do have a Sennelier tube of raw sienna that we will look at. This one is burnt sienna, and what happens is that in the manufacturing process, that includes also heating, the color of the pigment itself changes to this reddish brown sort of burnt sienna that we all know and love. Okay, so but originally it's quite yellow actually. Now the paint Sienna is named after the city-state of Siena, also called the Republic of Siena, which was a city-state in Italy that lasted a little over 400 years ago, from 1125 to 1555. So that's like 430 years until it was taken down. The first use of the word sienna as a color name in the English language dates back to 1760, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, 1760, just had to reconfirm that. Now, together with umber and ochre, these are some of the oldest paints that have been known to be used by humans, dating back to cave paintings, which is why I also think it's interesting to make this episode after the yellow ochre episode. So there was really old evidence of sienna and umber and ochre being used on cave paintings. Okay, so it makes it really one of the oldest paints in use. Now let me read to you the description here on the Schmincke brochure about burnt sienna. It says, traditional earth color recommended for landscape painting. So they've been quite sparse with their words here. Now let's talk a bit about the pigment. So the first one that it contains is PR 101. It's basically synthetic iron oxide. It's used in like a bazillion different paints. Let me go over some of them. It's really interesting. It's used in brown red, cadmium red, orange, caput mortuum, which is really interesting. Just an interesting name for a paint, and I do have it actually. English red, Indian red, iron oxide, maroon red, and Mars red, raw sienna, raw umber, red oxide, Venetian red, and on and on and on. This one, the PR 101, is like an orange pigment that's very popular. Now the second component is actually PBK9, pigment black 9, which is bone black. It's actually made of animal bones, which is interesting because I think, okay, so for Daniel Smith, which is, for example, a possible alternative, they use PBR7, which is pigment brown 7, and this is just red, brown iron oxide. So the result is quite similar, yet Daniel Smith's composition of the paint doesn't contain any animal parts, and so I do think that for burnt sienna in the future I will stick to Daniel Smith, and again, not to deduct from the quality of this one because it's really darn good, but still, just for this one specifically. So basically we have PR 101, as I said, which is synthetic iron oxide red, and we have PBK9, okay? Now, in terms of some nerd stats and some dry facts, this one is a Series 1. It has excellent light fastness, 5 stars out of 5. It's semi-opaque, and it is a staining paint. So just a very interesting composition, and I actually dug deeper and tried to see what other compositions for burnt sienna there are, and it looks like different brands really stretch this and really use different materials, different pigments to make this one. So I think this is one of the reasons why this show exists and why it's important to take a look at the ingredients contained within the paint. So for example, now I know to make a smarter decision in the future. I didn't buy this one, I get it. And again, the quality is fantastic. Really, I really enjoyed using this, but for me personally, I prefer to use one without animal bones. As an interesting side fact actually, ivory black today, which I also got to in the research, isn't made from ivory anymore. It's the same ingredient as PBK9 because it's forbidden to use ivory, and rightfully so. But animal bones are still in use, which make this PBK9. But anyway, let's not make the atmosphere too sad. I just wanted to finally review this paint. I will review the Daniel Smith's version probably in the future, but in a future episode, because I prefer not to do two similar ones one after another. I prefer to space it out. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Paint Show, and I will see you again in another episode and in another video tomorrow.